the most logical explanation for all of this stuff, there's no question, it's extraterrestrial beings. It's the most logical one. I mean, when you weigh all the evidence, right? You consider all the abductions, right? The claims of abductions, okay? The cattle mutilations, the thousands of cases where there's evidence left behind where these things landed. I mean, we've talked about that before. I mean, there's just way too much evidence. I mean, all the people that have claimed to have seen these objects throughout the years, they weren't seeing things, right? All the pictures that were taken, not all of them are fakes. Some of them are real. A lot of them are real. These days, there's a lot of fakes running around the internet, but for the most part, a lot of these classic photos before the advent of CGI, and they're real, right? I mean, they're just, the evidence outweighs it all. The reports that have been compiled over the decades, particularly since 1947 by the United States government. I mean, there have been so many different sightings by military personnel. It just becomes, it's inevitable. That's what it is. We're up against something that is beyond the technology that we possess. I know people out there are just afraid. I get it. I mean, there are people out there. I mean, I'm looking at Twitter today, and the people that are just dying to get an explanation that makes it seem mundane in a lot of, like, okay, we're just talking here about the Calvine incident, the Calvine photo, there are people out there, they need to be told that this is something that could be explained, something of earthly origin. I mean, they're really needing this information, that there's a fear out there. There's a fear out there of the possibility that there extraterrestrials are here. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. I mean, I could tell you right now, I could tell you, if I saw another flying saucer like I did in 1994, I'd be just as scared now as I was then. There's definitely a fear of this. I mean, unquestionably, I get it. But the fact of the matter is there's nothing you can do. You can't say, you can't put blinders on and say, well, there's nothing to it. There must be some other reasonable explanation. Well, what's reasonable? Why is the idea of extraterrestrials unreasonable? I mean, in a lot of these cases, that explains it perfectly. It's perfectly reasonable. When I was a kid, when I talked about this incident, I talk about it a lot when there was something in my room, some being in my room that had three digits on its hand, and that's it. It was a small arm with a weird looking hand that had three fingers on it, right? I could see the shadow clearly through this thin blue blanket that was over my head. And there was some kind of a noise, an electronic humming sound. And I've talked about this in detail before. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but the thing is at that time, I thought it was a demon, right? And I thought that for a long time. That was the only explanation I could come up with. I just didn't know. I never heard of the possibility of extraterrestrials visiting Earth and abducting people or anything like that. So it took me a long time to realize, and actually, I guess when you really think about it, I mean, in folklore, there's, people say they saw elves and things like that. Well, maybe at certain points in days of old, in the 13th century to 14th century, or, people did actually see things, and that elves was the only way they could explain it back then. Maybe these things have been coming here off and on and doing things, manipulating the human race in different ways over the centuries that, we're just not aware of at this time. And maybe we're not supposed to be aware of it. But let me tell you something. It's real. I mean, it is absolutely positively real. And I know this. I mean, I wouldn't be putting myself out here like this and saying these kind of things if I didn't think it was real. I know it is because I've experienced these. I came close to these. I saw an object and I am certain that there was an extraterrestrial being that was in my presence at one point, at least one time that I know of. Okay. So it's the truth. I feel supremely confident in telling that truth, and I feel at the same time I understand, the fear that people would have over this. It's really not that difficult to accept though when you consider everything here. I mean, life is a lot more complicated. This whole existence is a lot more complicated than. We're initially brought in to think it. I mean, just think about it. When you're a kid and you're taught a certain thing and the way things are. You're presented a certain image of how things are and what's real and what's not real. Over time, some kids grow up believing in. Certain things, and then later on they find out, it was just a joke. It was just something to tell me when I was a kid, and yet, but at one point you did believe it, right? I don't want to say what that thing is. I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about, but at one point, there's a point early on in life, during your earlier days where you might have believed in something and really did believe in that, and then as you got a little bit older, you realize, no, that can't be true. These presents must be coming from someplace else. You realize things, and I think that's what's going on here. As a human race, we're starting to realize things. I mean, logically speaking, what happened with, for instance, at the aerial school in Zimbabwe in 1994? Logically speaking, it's aliens. That's the logical explanation. That's logical. There's nothing illogical about it. I mean, considering all the planets out there, all the possibilities of intelligent life out there in this galaxy alone, let alone the whole universe, there's no question there's something going on. All these people that have claim to see these things, all of them aren't lying. Of course, there's going to be a percentage that making things up, hoaxers and things like that. But okay, let's chop it in half. We'll say of all the credible reports, we'll chop it in half and just take 50% of that. You're still left with 50%, right? You're still left with, okay, well, I guess it's real. It's the only logical explanation. I don't understand there's like a rush. Like for instance, the Calvine photo comes out, right? And there's a rush online there's a whole bunch of people online looking for an answer. Okay, it can't be extraterrestrial, right? Please tell me so. Somebody please tell me so. And why? Just accept it. Accept it. There's nothing. The reality is, I'm telling you right here, right? It's real, right? I mean, look at even what the Pentagon has been. I mean, what the Pentagon is saying right now. I mean, it's. For the past 5 years, I mean, it seems like they're building up toward something. I mean, how this effort started or why, there's different people in the background, right, that have gotten us to where we are right now, and they're trying to tell you something, in a roundabout way. I mean, they just acknowledged the existence of transmedium objects. Transmedium objects. That's something they never talked about before. Throughout the history of the military, the Pentagon talking about UFOs, they never acknowledged transmedium objects, not publicly like this. They are now. And the thing is, these things have been reported. There's different military officials throughout the years. Some of them came forth and actually reported these things publicly at certain points. Yeah, again, I'm not going to get into all the names and the research and the events, but if you did your research, like a lot of people seem a lot of people seem like they don't want to do that. You do your research, you would know that this stuff has been around a long time. Transmedium objects. It's not something that just cropped up in the last 5 years or just since 2004. This has been something that's been seen since 1947. And when you look at the history of technology, of human technology, you would realize that there's no way that any humans back in 1947 had transmedium technology like this, like what they're seeing, what they're talking about, what the Pentagon's telling you, acknowledging exists, acknowledging that some military personnel deal with sometimes. You have other different people in the military now just talking about it. It's logical. The only logical explanation is that it's extraterrestrial. Okay, I know that there's other people out there that want to say, well, it could be interdimensional or extra-dimensional and all that kind of stuff. Well, let's just say extraterrestrial for now and use that as the placeholder for the time being, because it's most likely extraterrestrial. But hey, it could be something else. There's something coming here. There's something here that's not human that has better stuff than we've got. It's as simple as that. And there's nothing illogical about that. There's nothing crazy about it at all. It's the logical explanation. It all makes sense when you think about it. All these things are easily explained then. There's no mystery to it once you realize it. Well, logically, what could it have been? This thing, it couldn't have been a meteor because it stopped while it was flying and then did a right angle turn, so it's not that. It couldn't have been a helicopter because helicopters make sounds. Couldn't have been a plane because a plane can't just stop in midair like that and then go backward. All right, you see where I'm going here? I mean, I just don't, all these people out there that are telling you this, just because you haven't seen, if you're one of those people out there that haven't encountered anything like what I've encountered or millions of other people have encountered, just because you haven't encountered it doesn't mean it's not there. It's there. You just haven't seen it. I think, a person could live their whole life and never run into any of these things. It was all by chance when I saw that UFO back in 1994. I'll be lucky. I'll probably never see one again. Not like that. That thing, there's no way. There's no way it could have been human made. There's just no chance. There's no chance of it. And I know there are people out there who will say, well, you don't have any proof. Well, I do have proof. I have my own personal proof, and I'm telling you it right now. I'm not lying about it, right? So just because there are people out there who just can't accept this from people like me and many other people, and they can't read the books or the data or accept the data, right? That's unfortunate for you because you're living life with blinders on. You're not accepting the reality. And you're not realizing that this is the most logical explanation. It's logical. Just because our scientists today can't, most of them will say, "Hey, well, it's impossible to get from here to there." Okay, yeah. For us now, our mentality, we're just not. Our scientists, I mean, they haven't figured it out yet, right? We're just not advanced enough yet, and our scientists aren't advanced enough yet. We're just, as a race, we're just not advanced enough yet to figure this out. Maybe if we're around for another 100,000 years, we might figure some things out, some different things. And that's what I have a problem here. That's my problem with the people who just aren't accepting this. It's time to get on board. It's time to get on board with reality and stop looking for people online to tell you, please tell me it's not true. Please, please, oh God, please tell me it's not true. Because it is true. It's true. And there's nothing, you can't do anything to change it. You could go through life pretending it's not true, but that's not going to change the reality. I mean, it's time to accept the only logical explanation to a lot of these things. Again, of course, there are things out there that can be explained, right? Sometimes things are balloons, right, flying around. But I'm talking about when things are right in front of your face, hovering like 20 feet in front of you, right? 2 stories off the ground, and it's a giant object that makes no sound. I'm talking about you're sitting there fishing at night. This is, for instance, like the Pascagoula incident. If you research that, I guess, see, that's the thing with the debunkers. These kind of cases, they'll just say, well, these guys are just lying. No, they weren't. They weren't lying. There was 2 guys that were fishing, right? And all of a sudden, some sort of a saucer landed behind them, and these beings got out and dragged them aboard some sort of a craft, did some examination on them, and then dragged them back out again. Some sort of robots, right? These guys weren't lying. I mean, if you were to read that story, read the reports on that story, right, you would realize that these guys aren't lying. In fact, one of them is still alive, and he still stands by by the story. So, I mean, and there's just so many other cases. There's so many cases. I mean, there's a lot of the well-known ones, but there's a lot of there's even more actually unknown stories. And how many people out there don't even go public with their stories? I mean, I would have to say millions. A lot of people probably just would want to keep it quiet because they're afraid of the stigma. But there's a lot of stories out there, and a lot of them, I would say, let's say, at least if 50% of them's true, then that's where are we? That means it's real. There's something here. So it's the only logical explanation. It's time for people to get their heads out of their butts and quit looking for peace with someone telling you a lie. Please tell me a lie. Please tell me that it's not real. I think about what you're doing. I mean, why? If you're not concerned about this, the people out there who have no concerns, right? The people out there who aren't interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials, ask yourself this question: why are you so interested in making sure that somebody tells you that the latest UFO pictures are fake? Why is that so important? That's because subconsciously you're afraid, very afraid, and you're looking for someone, even though deep down, a lot of you guys know, you realize, deep down you're fooling yourself, because the only logical explanation is extraterrestrials. The government's afraid to come right out and say something because of people like you. It's people like you. That's why you're gonna go batshit crazy. So it's time. It's time to say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. It's time.